Call, please.
Mr. Wojciechowski is absent.
He might be trying to get online. I don't know.
Mr. Mann,
Here.
Ms. Stevenazia,
Here.
Mr. Hetrick,
Here.
Mr. Murray,
Here.
Mr. Valen,
Here.
Ms. Minson.
Here.
Mr. Weissman,
Here.
Mr. Lynch,
Here.
Ms. Zamorano is absent, Mr. Pasternak,
Here.
Mr. Henry,
Here.
and Ms. Boswich is here.
Mayor, just for you, just point of information, is the Zoom on though for people who are watching the meeting?
I have it up on my screen. Is it not up on either one of the screens?
No.
No,
Oh. All right.
as long as it's on. I just want to make sure it was on. Yeah, okay.
Notice this meeting is provided for resolution adopted by the mayor and council on December 16th, 2024. At its regular meeting of the mayor and town council at the Boonton Town Hall, 100 Washington Street, Boonton, New Jersey, and by electronic mailing to the citizen of Morris County and the Delaware newspapers, through posting on the town website and by filing a copy of same with the town clerk. Members of the public were also permitted to submit written comments prior to the meeting via mail or email, which will be read during the public comment period. All public comments, whether during the public portion of the meeting or submitted beforehand, shall be limited to no greater than 3 minutes in duration. At this point, we'll go to various committee and liaison reports, starting with our administrator, Neil Henry.
Thank you, Mayor. In addition, what is on your agenda for this evening, the following key items have been addressed by the Administrator's Office since the March 17th council meeting. I attended a pre-construction meeting with the contractor who is paving the town hall parking lot. Work on that is scheduled for late May, weather permitting. Also worked in conjunction with representatives of the Boonton Housing Authority and the Morris County Engineering Department to formulate an alternative option on the flooding coming off West Main Street onto Chestnut Street and onto the property owned by the Boonton Housing Authority. Happy to report that the Veterans Banner Committee has located information and pictures for 62 veterans who have names on the monument in front of Town Hall. These banners have been ordered and the plan is to have them up on Memorial Day. We're still aggressively pursuing the balance of the 9 names from that memorial. Coordinated a meeting with the engineering department to get an update on the current projects they are working on. Additionally, discussions continue on how the administration proposes to replace our former municipal engineer. And as usual, work continues on managing matters related to personnel and other litigation. And that completes my report for this evening.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Mr. Henry?
Yeah, just one question, Mr. Henry. I know you and I have talked about the trash on Main Street, Plain Street, some of the overflowing bins. So just wondering if there's any updates around what we could potentially do for increased pickup or things like that.
Code enforcement has been out monitoring aggressively. I believe they've even issued some notice of violations. I will have the Department of Public Works continue to monitor that if these start to overflow. They, of course, can address that and try to keep that garbage to a minimum, but we're working on it. Thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Any others? Seeing none, we'll move on to DPW. Councilmember Balin.
Thank you, Mayor. In our previous meeting, we reviewed progress on, well, I should note that a couple of members of the committee were absent, but we reviewed with Neil and our superintendent updates on the Russell Street work, the installation of parking signs, the installation of water meters, and we've instituted 2 new actions, a review of commercial vehicles, following up with the recommendation of the Finance and Administration Committee. We're going to be continuing with that. And then also we discussed a possible reorganization for efficiency and increasing some public access to the river at the DPW yard. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any comments or questions, Councilmember Balin?
Did you have a chance to discuss or review the number of trailers that have been coming to the DPW yard? Was that one of the things that was on your list?
We did discuss that per the previous comment. I believe Neil, administrator, is going to give an update on that during the public comment portion this evening.
Great, thank you.
Moving on, library, Councilmember Minson.
Yeah, we had a meeting on the 11th of March. A few updates. The Church Street doors have been repaired. The makerspace floor demolition was scheduled to start this month, so hopefully it's going to be near finished. The interior design firms are submitting quotes for the updated furniture and shelving of the children's room. And they are soliciting further quotes for the fire alarm system, as I stated at the last time that I reported that quite an expensive overhaul that they're doing there. So they're looking for more quotes. And they also received 3 quotes for an updated website. So the timeline for the new library website is late summer. The programming continues to be robust. Summer reading program is already taking off, and they had a full house of programs this past month. And that concludes my library report.
Thank you. Any comments or questions regarding the library?
Just to mention that the makerspace floor is finished and they did the painting.
completed,
It's
yeah.
all opened up
Great.
again.
Moving on, Booton Main Street, Councilmember Minson.
Yeah, we met on March 28th. First Friday for May 2nd is going to be a gallery walk. So we encourage everyone to check out our, I guess, Upper West Side Art District of Main Street on May 2nd. Farmers Market, the plans for Farmers Market continue to be underway. We have 15 vendors that are committed, and Farmers Market opens on May 17th. We are also gonna have functionality for using your EBT card. So that's a significant upgrade. We're hoping that we'll be able to serve even more people. We continue work on Brewfest, which is scheduled for September 6th. Licensing is in process. Our major sponsors are lined up. Boontown and Hidden Tracks will be our major sponsors. And we also have 2 advertising campaigns, 2 new advertising campaigns that are happening as we speak. One is that we have an Explore Booton advertising campaign that's on the sides of buses. And so you should be seeing those traveling throughout Morris County. And then the second is that we've connected with 3 social media influencers for a series called A Day in Booton. Those handles are Hipservia, Jersey Girl Travels, and Montclair Girl. And they've been spending time in Booton and creating videos for their profiles. So we're definitely seeing just some movement there. So a lot of advertising is happening through Booton Main Street right now for businesses. And then the last thing is that our design team for Booton Main Street is working on an initiative to recreate Canal Side Park by replacing the invasive plants with native flowering plants. I got a sneak peek of that presentation. I think that they're looking to work at least in some way with Green Team. The presentation was excellent, and we will probably in the coming months be seeking to allocate some of our grant funding for this initiative. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Councilmember Minson? Seeing none, we'll move on to Housing Authority. Councilmember Di Venezia.
Okay, so the Housing Authority meeting was canceled. However, I do have an update by email from Sherry Sims. Part of it was already addressed by Mr. Henry during his administrator's report regarding flooding at the Chestnut Street. And going back to the drawing board on that, apparently there's some things going on. We're in the process of doing annual recertifications and unit inspections. So she was very, very busy. They're looking to replace the balconies and entrance at the building, Riverview, just the Plain Street housing, because they've become a safety hazard. Or at least that's what's been said to me. And they're very high scored. I do not know what the acronym is, but it's a CMAP, SEMAP. It's a high performer, and the score should be a 98. And there were some leaks, both sewer and plumbing, at the Plain Street apartments. So that is it. And that's it for Housing Authority. I do want to take an opportunity to speak very quickly to the Board of Education.
We'll come back to that.
Okay, fine.
Do we know why the meeting was canceled?
The meeting was canceled because she had a very busy day, a very full schedule with a lot of other, that was the reason I got to go back and look.
It wasn't because our members were not available, was it?
No, the members, she asked the members and they all said that they were available, but,
Okay.
and thanked her for her attention to all of these multiple issues.
Any questions?
They were
or
doing the
comments?
closeout for the audit is why.
Was that for audit?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on, we'll go to parking. Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. As alluded to by Councilmember Bellman, the remainder of new parking signs are being installed or about to be installed at the food pantry building next door. The police department is conducting a survey of town-owned handicap spots. Also, they are contacting owners of commercial private property with handicap parking to update the owner's information preferences to help with enforcement. Discussions continue on the best solution for Main Street parking, monetization, and enforcement. And the police department is looking into parking issues on Monroe Street that are occurring between neighbors, and they're going to consider different options to solve those. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any comments or questions regarding parking for Councilmember Murray? Seeing none, we'll move on to Councilmember Murray, Planning Board.
Thank you, Mayor. There was one application in front of the board concerning a subdivision on Monroe Street. Because it was a Class D variance, myself and the mayor could not participate. The applicant, however, was advised to return to the next meeting, which is this Wednesday with construction plans. That concludes my report.
Comments or questions?
Can I just circle back late for a parking question?
No, yes.
Just to confirm, I think that you mentioned the parking signs next door, but the new parking signs around Grace Lord Park have all been installed,
Oh,
correct?
yeah, I think these were the last remaining.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay, Board of Ed, Councilmember DiVinizio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Board of Ed is not meeting next week because they're on vacation for spring. So they are meeting tonight. Can't be in two places as much as I'd like to be. They had some very distressing numbers come back from their healthcare insurance regarding an approximately 28% increase. And so they have gone back out to the market to try to get a better rate. And those quotes are not yet finalized, so they are still working on the budget. And two of the things they're doing is they are scaling back the projected roof repair project from the entire auditorium wing to just the media center and the auditorium, which takes that cost down from 3 million to a little bit under 1 million. And the other thing is, the other thing was going out to shop for healthcare. So it looks as if the school budget will be looking at a 4% increase this year.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Councilmember DiVinizio? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, we have a special guest. Our assessor, Scott Holzhauer, is going to enlighten us on why we need a revaluation. That's the proper term. Or right in front of you, if you want to press the green light, wherever you're more comfortable.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mayor. So I'm not sure if everybody had gotten a memo that I had sent to Neil Henry regarding the reassessment, which provided some background in terms of how things precipitated. But basically back in mid-January, myself and the town attorney were summoned to the county tax board. Morris County does it a little bit different than most counties. They would just simply, most counties would send a letter in the mail saying that we've ordered you to do a reassessment or a revaluation. Morris County wants to make sure you get the message. So they bring you down there in person to tell you that we're ordering you to do a revaluation. So this is not an optional item. The county has the authority to do that. It's been 14 years since the town's last reassessment back in 2011. And it was 2008 that the last full complete revaluation was done. That was, of course, at the peak of the market, which is what precipitated the 2011 reassessment afterward. The board gave a very short timeline to effectively snap to attention and get the process going. When we were there, we started out by asking, could we have till, Mr. Semrau asked, could we have till June? And the board at that point had only wanted to allow 60 days for the town to act, which would have put us to mid-March. So They scoffed at the June thing and said, we'll give you till April 1st. So they added about 15 days to their thing. Then I asked for some additional consideration if we changed the scope of the project from being a revaluation to that of a reassessment as part of a 5-year program. And for that, the board, they conceded and gave another 15 days. That's where the April 15th date came from. But it was tough bargaining just to even get them to ease up in terms of when we acted. The one good side is that they were not typically at this time of year, I was surprised that they actually didn't try to order the town to implement the program for 2026. That was refreshing to see that they were realistic about the timeline and the amount of work that would be involved. And they ordered it to be implemented for tax year 2027. But they wanted the ball rolling this year so that there was a contract and all the preliminary foundational work could get going, knowing that the bulk of the work would then be done in 2026, I'm sorry, and then it would be implemented for 2027. I got quotes from a company called Appraisal Systems. They're the sort of dominant company that does most, if not all, the work in the northern part of the state. I presently have them in other towns doing reassessments where I'm the assessor. So I'm very familiar with the work. I've worked with them for 25 years. And I'm very satisfied with their work product, and so are the towns that I work in. Any call or check to the town administrator in any of those towns, and it would echo the same thing. We did get quotes for Appraisal Systems gave me the full palette of the potential quotes. One for doing the revaluation, which is the most bulky and cost, not cost efficient, but costly option of the programs. And that's the old standard by which things always used to be done. When values were changed, it was always the mechanism when the town changed its values was by a revaluation. The concept of reassessments has always been around, but the rolling or annual reassessment is really a creature that's been more of the past 10 to 12 years, coming out of the last big spike in the market back in 2007, 2008, and then the collapse that ensued kind of spurred towns that even when they did a reassessment to try to catch the ball as it's falling, found out that they didn't get it all because it continued to go. Nobody really has a crystal ball to predict that. And you can't really just in your 1 year of doing the work, try to guess what it'll be in 2 years so that you can hedge your bet and get in front of it. And then towns were finding themselves having to come back more than once to try to address the problem. And that sort of led to how a lot of towns now tackle it, which quite honestly, in the pricing scope that I got, it's really the most cost-effective way for the town to do something because it allows the program basically is done. Values are set for 5 years consecutively. The first year is the heavy lift because that's when all the homes are inspected, all the commercial properties, all the exempt properties, every single physical structure is inspected, measured, information gathered about it. And new values are determined. That would be what would go on for 2027. Then for the 4 years after that, the town still evaluates all the properties in town, but the state requires that 25% of them be re-inspected each of those 4 years to total 100% of re-inspections at the end of that 4-year period. Most people, quite honestly, think that 25% requirement is not really necessary, but nonetheless, it's the state's requirement and that's not really optional. We have a good construction department in town. As the assessor, I get copies of every building permit, all the COs. I know what's going on in town. I get the land use board applications. I'm very up to date in terms of what's happening. And so, in my opinion, you would need to do the additional inspections beyond the ones that I'm notified about where something's taken place. Nonetheless, it's 25% a year for 4 years, and all the properties though are revalued. Market data is analyzed, and every property is looked at. The commercials, all new income approaches are done based on whatever the economic relevant data for capitalization rates, gross rents, expenses, et cetera. That does change from year to year. So it's all evaluated. And it has proven, to be honest, when this kind of program came into being, I actually, believe it or not, testified down at a commission in Trenton. It was called LUARC at the time, local unit, something realignment. It had a whole kind of crazy acronym letters. But they were interested, that committee or commission was interested in having towns revalue property every single year forever kind of thing. And I testified on behalf of the Assessors Association why that wasn't a good idea. It's weird to find that I'm now on the other side of that, having actually, and I came in kind of kicking and screaming to that idea of doing it that way. But now, having done it in some towns where I've been for 4 years, I do see strongly the benefits of it, because it's very hard, no matter how good a company is, it's hard to get everything right the first time. You try, you do the best you can, but there are the practical limitations on perfection. Nobody quite gets there. The good thing about having the additional years after the big base year is that you can continue to smooth the data out. Not every neighborhood is going to have a representative amount of sales volume in any given year that you're doing your analysis, but yet you're still charged with valuing all the properties. There's different things that are going to change, development, approvals, et cetera. And it's good to be able to have extra bites at the apple instead of having to do it all in one shot. And it also allows for a little bit of a smoothing if there's going to be any kind of a significant ratable shift, say from commercial onto the residential, having multiple years to kind of ease that in instead of one painful year and a revaluation. There's no smoothing. These are the numbers and this is what it is. So for all those reasons, including the cost estimate for a reval was $430,000, and that doesn't include the tax map component, which would have to be bid separately. And my experience shows that number could be anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000, $60,000 easily, if not more. Mendham Township, which is not a big town, it's got less line items than we actually have here. Their tax map redo was $70,000. And we have many more pages on our tax map than there is over in Mendham. So if that cost came out to $470,000, $480,000 with the map included for a 1-year revaluation versus the 5-year reassessment, which at the end of the 5th year would total $480,000 in charges. It's pretty much the same, but you get a much better product because you get a chance to continually refine your work. And God forbid the market changes. I think it would be naive for anybody to think we're in a, just because it hasn't changed dramatically yet, it seems to be hanging on a thread, quite honestly. And now we've got crazy volatility in other sectors, and I'm not really sure. I don't have that crystal ball. I wish I did. But it's tough when you're doing a revaluation and you only have the data to work with, and it happens to be at the peak of the market. And then whether it's COVID or a 9/11 or God forbid the stock market collapses because of, craziness that's going on. Then the town finds itself, now what do? We either manage it through a ton of tax appeals, or we have to re-engage and get approvals to do a reassessment to follow the revaluation.
So this is not discretionary. We're being ordered and we have
Yeah,
no
it's in
say.
order. There's no discretion and the county board has full authority. And when a town doesn't cooperate with the county board's attorney is the attorney general for the state of New Jersey. And when a town doesn't cooperate, the county board has the authority to actually do the revaluation themselves, and they'll just charge you back for it through county equalization. So one way or the other, it'll get done. But then you don't really get to control it. I think I've been the assessor now for 10 years here. I think you'd be in better hands with me steering the ship than somebody else.
So with this rolling reassessment, I guess in year one, they adjust everybody's value and then everybody gets adjusted based upon the next 4 years of 25%.
Everybody gets adjusted to the extent that they require adjustment. I mean, in a wonderful world, we'd be in a sort of flat, stable market where the adjustments would be kind of minimal after the first year. But, quite honestly, property values from COVID to now have changed by, 40% plus. I mean, it's crazy.
And how do our values currently compare to fair value now, percentage wise?
We're at, the assessment ratio is 67%. But that ratio is a lagging indicator because it's a compilation. It's kind of complicated the way the ratio is figured out. It's not a 1 year sampling period. The sampling period goes from July 1st to June 30th of the pre-tax year, and the average ratio information they get from that, they average with the answer that they got the year before, which had been averaged with what they got the year before. So the current DNA tracks back a while. So I'm processing sales in the office every day in the 50s, but yet our ratio is 67%.
Anybody else have questions for Mr. Olzau?
I do. Thank you. Thanks for the update. It's very informative. Why now?
Well, the county, that's a good question. I think the county, quite honestly, would have been ordering sorry, I don't know if that's me, would be ordering these. This is a normal function that the board does. I'm just guessing, but my opinion is that they held off on ordering because they felt the market was very volatile and they didn't want to be in a situation of ordering. I think they believed that at any given point in time, the market was going to reset, and they didn't want to put towns in a position, especially with a revaluation of now, the market resetting. But they sat and they watched like myself and everybody else did for 4 years, and nothing's happened, but it's continued to go up. I think at some point they just decided, you know what, we've got to get back to business. And that's why now, as opposed to not earlier, because their normal policy, county boards will order a reassessment or revaluation. They have 3 primary criteria. One is when the ratio drops below 85%. The second is if it's been 10 years since your last revaluation or reassessment. And the third is if your coefficient of deviation is greater than 15%. And that's a statistical measure of spread, how far things average away from the average ratio. We hit 2 of those 3 items. We're greater than the 10 years and our ratio is dropping. And to the point where the state actually, and I'm not sure if it was always their policy, but in the last several years, I know the mayor has gotten a letter from the Division of Taxation saying that your equalized value has changed by more than 10%, meaning that your ratios dropped, which implies a higher ultimate value. And they're kind of putting the town on notice that, hey, just so you know what's going on, your values are changing kind of dramatically. And what that does is it opens the town up to tax appeals, primarily on commercial property. Because the commercial properties, some of the different types of properties have done extremely well in this aggressive market. Industrial properties have exploded in value, and apartment properties have exploded. Retails are hanging on by the skin of their teeth, and there's a lot of big retails in town. Our 2 largest ratables are the Walmart shopping center and the Acme shopping center. and that's $34 million of assessment. If they filed an appeal just strictly looking for what's called ratio relief, saying that my value back when COVID started and we were at a 92 or 93% ratio, I'm content that my value, my assessment then represented pretty close to my value, and I think that's the case now. It's just that now I'd like that 67% ratio, please. And one or two of those appeals could result in $150,000, $200,000 of tax loss, just like that. And that's just two properties. So we're really, the biggest worry I have is that in a town like this, you have some large ratables that make the town vulnerable to, you don't have to have a lot of appeals to really impact your reserve to the extent that we have a reserve, and I'm sure we do. And we've been really good about the appeals that we've had in the past, trying to resolve them without there needing to be money taken out of the reserve. We've tried to resolve them with a going forward solution. And that, for the most part, has worked, but the numbers have just changed too drastically now for that to really be a strategy.
So I'll just say, I have one other question. You answered one of them already with the, what happens if we say no or do nothing? What I don't understand is, and correct me if I'm wrong, does the county use the town assessed value in their determination of the county tax?
Yes, the county, our rateable base is factored into the overall equalization for the county, where whatever our share is now, we take our assessed value of like 1.1 billion, and it's divided by 67% ratio, which comes up to about 1.6 billion in terms of implied equalized market value, and everybody's equalized to be at the same standard when the county then apportions what, each county's obligations are for county taxes.
So I may not understand that. If a couple years ago, we discovered that the county tax assessment was inconsistent with what we expected, and the answer, I think I've understood from Mr. Yazzie at the time, and I'm sure I only understood a portion of it, was that they used the fair market value, not our town assessed value. Is that correct?
So by fair market value, I'm essentially saying the assessed value plugged into that 67% to give you the equalized valuation, which is theoretically supposed to be in that same sort of market value range. So I believe you both said the same thing. That you're
What happens though, are the town's share can change. The data ratios are one or two sales can drastically influence a town's ratio. And some towns don't have a lot of market activity, and maybe they get a couple of sales that come in that are state sales and things that the state considers to be non-usable sales, and they're thrown out of their analysis. There's 33 different criteria by which a sale gets thrown out of the state's sales analysis. In a town that happens to have had a couple of really high sales, which, throw off a low ratio, the math on that can be pretty dramatic. And so not every town, just because we're all generally experiencing the same 5 to 10 or 15% growth in value, it doesn't always reflect that way in the ratios. I'm shocked in one of my towns, Mendham Borough, I've had a couple of years where the ratio hardly moved, just 2 points. And yet I'm seeing sales over there that are in the 60% range. And yet the ratio is like in the mid to upper 80s. It's a complicated formula. And, while I understand it, I don't understand it enough to teach it, I'll tell you that. So not everything works that way. And that's why in a given year, maybe the way our ratio changed required Boonton to shoulder a little bit more of the percentage load in the county. That's the only thing I can surmise, not having been part of it, whatever that was back then.
I'll ask one more. Is there any precedent for this kind of deadline? I mean, it's a $500,000 budget item. that we're given 60 days to comply with?
Yeah, this is how Morris County operates. Yes, this is the precedent right across the board. Morristown tried to, the county felt there was a stall tactic because they got ordered to do a revaluation, and the tax map like I said, is a big component part. The tax map took an inordinate amount of time to get completed, but the county board felt that the town was actually sort of gaming the system and blaming it on the tax map. And that did not last long before the mayor and the town attorney were called down to the county board, and that revaluation got fast tracked after that. So I hate to say it, and nobody likes to be told, especially such a big ticket item, but the warning signs have been coming now. And back in 2022 was the first time I was asked to get quotes for what it might take to do a revaluation or reassessment. So it's been coming.
Just to put something clear, it's $500,000 over 5 years, not $500,000 in a single
If
payment.
we do the reassessment, which is what's on the.
Yes,
agenda,
it's
correct, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
The different scenarios are roughly equivalent in cost, so, except the second one is less, but carries a higher risk, so, Can I ask a couple of questions? So is there an advantage to doing a reassessment in one go versus this 5-year roll, as far as, in an uncertain real estate environment, is it more advantageous to do a 5-year roll, so that if there is a dip in the market, maybe we recapture it on the rise again? Or
Yes, the biggest advantage, and something that I've really discovered by doing it, is that when the market changes, now we've just been in a market that has, for the last 4 or 5 years, has only changed one way. It's basically gone up, but it hasn't gone up for every sector. And that's one of the things that a roll, as you call it, the annual analysis, catches. But sometimes the sector, things change. There was a period not long ago, industrial property could be got for $50 to $60 a square foot. Now a good building, there was one on Fulton Street, large building, 110,000 square feet, that sold for like $187 a square foot. That's a change that literally happened in a handful of years. And just as fast as that happened, that could probably at some point, because the new thing is to build these giant warehouses everywhere. Sooner or later, it's going to be just like when they built all the office buildings.
collapse eventually.
There's going to be a problem with that.
My other question actually has to do, and I don't know if it's relevant to this or not, to residents of the town who are either currently eligible or would be eligible in the future for a senior tax freeze. And if you're right on that bubble right now, or in 26 or 27, can you speak at all as to how someone who's eligible for tax freeze would be impacted by that?
Yeah, so the tax freeze is sort of immune to the reassessment or revaluation process, because all that really focuses on is what your taxes are, not, so to speak, what your assessment is. And in a perfect world, if our ratio is 67%, and to get it to 100%, property values would have to increase 35–40%. In theory, the tax rate then would drop 35 to 40%. And so if you were somebody who moved at the same general percent that things changed, then while your assessment would go up, when the rate changes from 335 or whatever it is down to 210 or 250, your taxes will still net out fairly close to what they were.
Thanks.
Okay, Ben.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. Just a couple of questions from my end. Just to pick up where Councilmember Balin, I think, left off or was going, just so I understand. So if I have a house with it that I've owned for, let's say, 10 years, and the assessed value of the house is about $300,000, and you said it's been what, I think
2011.
Yeah, 2011. So let's say 2011, my assessed value was $300,000. Now it's probably pretty close to $300,000 because we haven't done a reassessment, right? So my tax paying experience in Boonton has just been whatever Boonton, library, school tax, but that's what my taxes have gone up, right? But in that same scenario, the amount of tax I'm paying to the county has also gone up. Because now the market value of my house is, let's say it's been great. Now it's $600,000, the market value of my house.
Mhm.
The county is the county paying attention to that $600,000 at all?
Again, the county uses the director's ratio, which is that 67% that we keep talking about.
Okay.
So, and that ratio is established for all 34 towns in the county. And they have what's called an equalization table, and everybody's assessed values are listed. The ratio is in there, and then basically the, one divided into the other results in the indicated true value or true market value, a lot of different terms for the same thing.
And then the county's taxing me on that true market value.
Yeah, their percentage is gonna be, the tax is still against your assessment, but in terms of how they figure out what everybody's percentage is based off of the true value.
Okay.
Because otherwise, if you were just using assessments and one, like we've been 2011, another town might have been 2017 or 18, their assessments are gonna be different because it was done at a different point in time. The way to equalize everything, which is why it's called equalization, is to bring everybody up to true value, then do your apportionment, and that's how that is done.
Couple other questions. As part of it, you referenced exempt properties. How do exempt properties play into a townwide reassessment?
The exempts are treated just like every other property. They're, whether it's a church, a school, hospital, whatever, they're inspected. And quite honestly, it's a good thing when there's a reassessment, because ordinarily, since they are not tax-paying properties, they don't get the attention perhaps that tax-paying properties do, where you have owners that are constantly, they know whether they're overassessed or not. And if, God forbid, something, or they're underassessed, somebody's neighbor usually whispers in my ear, say, hey, there's this situation. So one way or another, there are a lot of eyes on the properties that pay taxes, not so much on the properties that don't, but those properties that don't often, or, at some points do, they sell, or their use, what they were qualified for, the exempt use changes. And something that was a parsonage occupied by the presiding clergy for an individual church or religious worship place. Sometimes that the clergies change, and the new one doesn't want to leave their house. They'd rather take the stipend. It's kind of like, do you want to use a company car, or we'll give you an allotment for your car. And so when the house isn't being used for that purpose, it goes back on the tax roll.
So part of this process is, when you say inspection, it's inspection of use as well.
Yes, yeah, especially on exempts. It's one good crack that I have as the assessor to find out what's happening on exempt property.
Just two more. The 25% year over year, you can throw that off on the grade. How I understand if there's building permits that come in and that falls in, but otherwise, how are those 25% selected?
So in year one, the 25% is primarily no matter, I should say year two, the first year of the 25%. Year one, when every door is knocked on and 3 attempts are made to inspect the property, even with that effort, 2 physical attempts and then a letter from my office saying nobody's gotten in, please call the office to schedule an appointment. There will still be probably 25% of the town that just for whatever reason doesn't permit the inspection. And that's the first area that we focus on, is the properties that were what we call estimates during the primary year. And so year two, the 25% is kind of helter-skelter around town, really just of the estimates. In year three, that next 25% really just becomes quadranting the town up into 3 portions and dividing that for the next 3 years.
Got it. Okay. And you actually just led perfectly into my last question, which is there, I guess the only way to phrase this sort of around our individual experience. So all of us, you know, our Boonton residents, obviously, will all be subject to this, you know. What is the experience that I'm gonna have? So we approve this, now it's year one. So just walk me through what my experience is gonna be with appraisal. I'm curious about appraisal a little bit, why
Yeah,
that's the
the
only.
company starts out, the first thing that they'll do after some of the background work is done to kind of get the ball rolling. The first thing that they do is a mailing to all the residents in the municipality, notifying them that there is this program that's now going to be going on. You can anticipate somebody coming to your property to make an inspection, and it will provide information about a webinar that they conduct on the front end before they really get going. And the webinar is very good. I mean, I've seen it multiple times, so it doesn't change. The information is the information, but they go through what the resident will experience. And it's probably a 25-minute presentation, followed by, then it's Q&A. And the company stays on till all the questions are answered. I had one town where it was maybe 50 or 60 questions asked, and it lasted for, an hour and 15 minutes after the initial presentation. Another town where there was like 7 or 8 questions asked, and then it was done. It really depends on who checks in. And, there's going to be questions like, well, will they have identification? What happens if I'm not home? What happens if I can't be there when they want to do it? The normal questions like that. When the inspection phase is over, the evaluation phase happens concurrently, but predominantly toward the back end of that when we actually have the data that we're doing the valuation analysis on. Then values will be determined, and a letter will be sent out to every rateable property owner, not to the exempts, but to the rateable property owners, advising them of what their proposed assessment is and giving them a way to kind of make sense of that, instead of just saying, here's your number and it changed by like in your case, 300 to 600. What does that mean? Well, they'll show this is what your assessment was previously and your taxes, and this is what your assessment is proposed to be now, and what the anticipated tax rate is, basically taking the new rateable base, dividing it into the budget from the prior year, because we don't know what next year's budget will be when we set the values, to come up with sort of an equivalent tax rate. And you'll find out that, okay, my assessment was 300,000 before, and my taxes were 13.5. Now my assessment's 580 and my taxes are going to be 13.8. So you get some way to measure that. Your assessment doubled, but your taxes went up $300.
Got it. All right, 2 follow-ups, then I promise I'm done. The first is, what if I disagree? Is that a done deal, or do I have an opportunity for an appeal?
Whether you disagree, or even if you're just curious, which probably at least half the people are at the end, there's a process to schedule for what's called a hearing, where you'll come in and meet with somebody from the appraisal company that will go over the information on your property record card. Because somebody's going to come to your property, take a lot of notes, drawings, take some photographs, and you're not going to really get a sense of what that information is until it turns into what we call our property record card, which is a little nicer, neater to look at. It'll have a sketch of the building, the room count, the year built, a description, any particular notes, if there's things that potentially influence the value, a shared driveway, an easement, or whatever the case might be, traffic. But yes, you'll have the ability to call, come in, review the information. If you have information you think that they didn't consider, here's some photographs. I saw the guy came, it happened to be on a good day, but here's what happens when it rains, or, you always get things. You can only see as much as you can see in the 10 minutes that you're there, walking through a property. Homeowner has a lot more to offer.
Because I was going to ask you about that. So for example, if a property gets really flooded when it rains, that property will have an opportunity to give that information to them.
Yeah, it's really not appropriate to give it to the field guy that comes to the house to gather the information. That's appropriate to give after the values have been set preliminarily, and because then it goes more directly to the, either to myself or to the supervisor for the appraisal company. where it can be evaluated properly.
Okay, and then the inspection. So, and I'm still 24 hours and 45 minutes from Cory Booker, so I got a ways to go.
Okay.
The inspection piece is, that's someone just shows up and knocks on my door? That's not, I know in Lincoln Park, those are scheduled appointments, but that's not what we're talking about. People show
No,
up and knock on the door.
yeah, they will go out. Now, the appraisal company, technology is wonderful. It didn't used to be this way, but now they actually post on their website. There's a link to every town that they do. So if you went to Appraisal Systems website, you'd be able to go to the link for the town of Boonton, and we would have our own sort of page space. And they have properties listed, and they say which inspector will be doing them and the rough date line as to when they're going to do it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thankfully, no.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Well, good. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
All right.
We have another presentation from our CFO, who's going to do that in a fraction of Scott's time.
Yeah, we're live on Zoom, monitoring that one.
Evening. CFO and tech support, Mike Yazdi. I'm not sure how you raise this, but. So good evening. So we're here once again. This always comes back around way too quickly. But budget introduction. Our 2025 budget, we've worked on this extensively with our finance committee and thereafter with the remaining council members, with anyone with questions. So I think we've done a good job coming from, some of our different struggles we reviewed last year, which was big on insurance, garbage contracts, our union agreements constantly increasing. And, some similar challenges this year, but we were able to tackle them as efficiently as possible. So again, our budget team, Neil Henry, the administrator, myself, the finance committee, Mr. Mayor Jim Lynch, Ben Weissman, John Meehan, and Dan Balin, and our auditing firm, our auditor, Dieter Lurch, who has reviewed this budget at the end of the process to make sure we're all within compliance of the various statutes and cap calculation requirements. So as I said, the extensive process starts in October, where I ask all of the department heads, here's, first 3 quarters of data. Can you please review this? We can set up meetings and put in for your next year request. Those I usually get by the beginning of November, in some cases a little later. And that also comes along with capital requests in the November, December timeframe. We had meetings in December, and once we get to January, it's when the finance committee really picks up. We have meetings, I think we had them twice a week at a lot of points. And then February hit on capital extensively, and we were able to cut a significant number down to something more reasonable. To preface this discussion, and I've talked about this the past couple years, is the way we make our decisions within the budget is quite restricted. In this chart here, and sadly you'll see a lot of pie charts, not my favorite, but there's only so many ways to show data well. So in this pie chart here, the yellow section is the other expenses portion of the budget. This is really our primary section to make adjustments within. When you look at our insurance number, we were able to change insurance providers. However, we're not able to, necessarily do away with it or cut the number in half, right? It's really not a negotiation. Debt and capital is a result of our prior year decisions. That sort of is what it is, and we make decisions each year to try to improve that number. And then various things like salaries from our union agreements, and various contracts, and the statutory requirements like our town share of taxes and pensions and things of that nature. So first I'll hit on the budget appropriations. The darker portion of this chart, the large section being salaries and wages, the next one to the right, insurance, and then the employer taxes and pension cost make up about 54% of our budget at around $9 million. Apart from that, we have another statutory requirement, the reserve for uncollected taxes, at about 10% of our budget, or 1.5 million. And then the gray section at the bottom is that operating expenses that we work within. Only a quarter of our budget. The debt service and capital improvement fund section, which is brown and a lighter brown color, make up about 10% of our budget. That's something that, like I said previously, is a result of our prior year decisions. This is where we can, work towards paying down the open debt we have, try to limit the flow of capital improvements when possible, and sort of adjust the debt side of that to more capital improvement fund side, which is fully paying for projects up front. Within this budget is, something along the lines of $400,000 of interest payments on that debt. So as we move away from that, that's where we would like to take that $400,000 of interest and just put it straight towards paying for projects. Next slide, please. Touching on that, we've done a pretty good job of having a healthy capital improvement fund balance at around $500,000. After adding the $300,000 in this budget, that number will be $760,000 to try to work towards more fully funding projects and less debt reliance. It takes a very long time, and it takes commitment over multiple governing or town councils who players may change, but we need to try to, constantly steady the ship in that regard. So the flip side is the budget revenues. On the left part here, the red portion is our taxes, which makes up about 2/3 of our budget revenues. We sort of back into that number, whereas depending on what our expenses are and what other revenues we can get to offset those taxes is what we're left charging the residents of the town. So not only is it cutting those expenses, it's also trying to create new revenues. A couple of those new revenues, the cannabis tax that we added on, we're not fully capturing this year because we only have the 1 quarter receipt, and we're within the state requirement to not go above what we received last year. But that's in there. We are adding parking meters as a partial revenue, and then our court revenues, which were extremely suppressed, have increased by 50% in our budget this year. So those items there make a big difference in offsetting the tax increase. Couple other items on the right, our municipal revenues at 5.5%, which make up those parking meters, court revenues, your garbage stickers, at most things you can think of that you would come to town hall to pay. Our pilot makes up about 5.5%, 6%. And then the state aid portion makes up another 5.5%. And then our surplus is, whatever is left over each year. We try to maintain a healthy fund balance. And then we also try to use as much of that as we can to offset taxes to keep things stable. So just a breakdown of our taxes. This is based on our 2024 numbers. Our share is the red portion at the top at about 26%. The schools portion is 62%, about 2/3 of the total tax bill, and then the county portion is around 10%. These are relatively the same each year, and you'll see in a couple slides how those have changed over time. But when you pay your tax bill, you come here, you only deal with us, you get your letter from us, and we send you notices when you don't pay, but only a quarter of that money stays with us. We do those things because we have bills to pay to these other entities who receive all of their taxes, and we take the hit if we don't collect them all.
And
Thanks.
I'm sorry, just to say it,
Sure.
and if people, when we don't collect taxes, we're still on the hook for all those bills and still on the hook for it. So that reason that reserve for uncollected taxes is
Right.
9.9%, I think it was, something like that, is because if any of us don't pay our taxes, we're still paying the county and et cetera, et cetera.
Right, we need to overfund that tax pot so we have money to pay out because those entities rely on us to collect for them. So now what you've all been waiting for, right? The 2025 proposed taxes. So we've stayed consistent, bottom line at 1.99% increase on the municipal tax. That includes the library number, which is part of the state statutory formula. So this results in about $67 increase on the average household from the municipal tax of the portion that we're voting on and essentially control. I do have some information from the other entities. The school tax increase will be about $220 at 2.9%. I heard Councilmember DiVenezia mention that they might be changing their budget. They send me a form called the A4F, which is their tax number, but essentially their bill. So based on that number, that's what we resulted in. So if that were to change, that number would therefore change. And then the county portion, again, a couple of you mentioned this earlier. They have a 0 rate increase, but again, however, because that true market value has increased, they charge us the same rate of a higher number, means higher tax obligation paid to them. So that's around 3%. That's not a final number, but just based on their budget and calculating it myself. So however much they raise taxes, it's not one-to-one. Our average residential value has gone up slightly. Our total town value has gone up slightly, and that goes into the formula to spit out slightly different percentages than you may hear from the other entities. And then just a highlight of the trend of those entities. You can see the bottom bar is from 2015. That's your tax bill and the tax rate at that time. In 2024, that's the top bar there. That's how your taxes have changed over the past 10 years. So for the red portion, municipal, over the past 10 years, we've increased 18% or 1.8 per year. The counties increased 31% or 3.1% per year, and the schools increased 27% or 2.7% per year. So when we look at things that way, we've tried to be as conservative as possible to stay within a reasonable inflationary number. And I think we've done a good job of that without sacrificing the future or, kicking the can down a road on various projects or expenses. But overall, I think we had a good budget process. Thank you again to those members of the Finance Committee. And that's it for my presentation. If you have any questions.
Any comments or questions for CFO?
Thanks for all the hard work.
Yeah, appreciate
Yeah.
the hard work, Mike.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our consent agenda.
Sorry, Mayor, just a point of information, just before we move on, it's up there, I just want to make sure. So the next step in this process is that there'll be a public hearing on the budget on May 5th, where we'll vote on final adoption, is that right?
And may I ask one question? It's an easy one. So when the Board of Ed, I believe they have their budget hearing on April 28th.
Okay.
So would you be willing to revise that chart that shows what the total tax impact on a household would be to reflect what their actual budget increase is going to be?
Yes, yeah, I can do that.
Awesome, thank you.
And the
That's if
county,
you only get the AF form before, or maybe.
Right, so I don't know if what they sent me is final. Usually they'll bring it to our town.
They're,
clerk to
they're having their
certify.
budget hearing on April
So-
28th, so I think it would be final at that point.
Right, if it's final at that point, then I'll make that update.
county's already done their budget, but they haven't figured out how it's gonna be divided up among the various municipalities.
That's why it's just.
Right, I don't have that equalization breakdown.
Right.
They publish the data online, so I've taken those numbers and tried to calculate it myself. So I'm probably within a reasonable number, but I don't have those final
Okay.
numbers.
Thank you.
And one other thing, there is the COLA ordinance on for introduction, which coincides with budget. This is a, on paper reserve of potential increase in future years. It's not something we really use, but in the case of a drastic situation, it allows us to bank what we didn't use this year, not real money, just an allowable increase for future years in the worst case scenario. So pretty standard practice, but not actual dollars being spent or anything along those lines.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Moving on to consent agenda, resolutions 25-96 through 25-107. Can we,
And then
can we get a motion, to open this up for discussion?
So moved, Weissman.
second, Vincent?
All in favor?
Aye.
So Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to add resolution 25-108, which everyone has copy up to the consent agenda.
Can you read it in title?
Sure, it's a Town of Booton resolution improving settlement agreement.
All in favor of and at the consent agenda?
Aye.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the consent agenda?
I have two questions. One, the budget is part of the consent agenda, is that correct? Okay, and then second, can we, item number 25-102, is it possible to pull a single item for us, to table a single item from that list? This is, cancellation of capital appropriation balances.
Make a line item change. Remove one line.
Correct. Well, before I make that motion, I guess I would ask,
Well, why don't you talk about it and make your case?
okay,
Yeah.
Now's my chance.
Please.
Thank you. So, I raised this with, Mr. Henry, and there's item, it's the Hill Street slope failure repair. We're waiting on, explanation from the superintendent as to why this is proposed for cancellation. It affects a number of residents in my ward. We did probably 2 years ago, maybe, we had a individual property owner related to this slope failure appear before the probably a workshop at that time, or the DPW committee. But in any case, we have two options. We could cancel it and bring it back if we find at our next DPW meeting that that's necessary. I just know that it's harder to bring it back than to keep it on. And I'd love to just keep it on if we can until we get that explanation from the superintendent on a course of action. But I guess maybe I don't feel strongly about it. I would say if we can, the question would be, can we bring it back on? How difficult is it to bring it back on if we remove it tonight?
What I would, suggest, can you hear me? What I would suggest is that you just make a motion to remove that second line, 2019-5, remove it from the cancellation list. And then if you want to bring it back on as a resolution for the next meeting, you can do that after your explanation.
So that would be, if I can get a second, I would make a motion to pull that line from the consent agenda, pending the hearing the explanation from the superintendent. And if we find that it indeed should be canceled, we would bring it back on at the next meeting.
Can I ask, is your concern that other additional remediation might be required that would need these funds?
Yeah, I think the reality is there's been no remediation, or perhaps emergency remediation that was done a number of years ago. And so yes.
Does the cancellation save us any borrowing or financing costs? Mr. CFO?
That's a good question.
That money is currently bonded, so that would come to our fund balance, which we could offset for a debt payment. It's not immediately necessary, so we could always wait and either do it at a later meeting or even next year in the cancellation process. It's not.
So this $600,000, would that all go to debt repayment or some of this isn't?
At the bottom, there's sort of a breakdown of where the money goes, I believe.
Okay,
So anything that says reserved for debt service, which might not even be on there, a small amount, would go to pay off a note. Otherwise, most of it's bonded. We can't just remove that debt or pay it down quicker. It just sits in our pocket to help repay the debt.
there's no real harm in waiting a month
There's
to
no
do
harm
this.
in waiting, correct?
Thank you.
All right.
I'll second it then.
I'll make the motion to pull the Hill Street slope failure from the resolution 25-102.
Second.
Does this require a voice vote or a roll?
I'll do a roll call, Mayor, just to-
Can we do a roll call on this, please?
Balin,
Yes.
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 Ms. Minson,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Weitzman,
Yes.
Mayor Lynch.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, now I'm throwing off my game now. Any other comments or questions on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll close the discussion and call for motion to move the consent.
I'll
agenda.
make a motion, we approve the consent agenda, including the new resolution 25-108.
Second.
Oh. Before we call a voice vote, didn't you want to change some wording?
Not yet.
Okay. All right, then, let's do a roll call then. Sorry.
Mr. Balin,
Yes.
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
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 Yes. Moving on, unfinished business. Ordinance 05-25, public hearing, proposed adoption. An ordinance amending Part 2, General Legislation, Chapter 130, fees, and Chapter 216, recycling within the code of the town of Boonton. See here. We'll get a motion to open this up for council discussion.
So moved, even easier.
Second, Balin.
All in favor of discussion?
Aye.
Any comments or questions regarding this?
I do have one question, just on the sticker program. It's unclear to me if people who already have purchased these stickers at a rate previous, if they'll still be able to use them. So if they purchase, the answer is, so, okay. That's all.
So you're smart, you stocked up.
Okay, and there's no public,
Point of order, Mayor, there is a public, it's on the bottom of the page before.
okay, I thought so.
Yeah.
I turned the page too fast.
Yeah.
Mm,
So I can make a motion to open up for public.
Please do.
I will do that. I'll make a
Second.
motion to open up. Oh,
Well, I'll come
You have a
back.
comment?
I'm sorry. Reflected only homeowner passenger vehicles, are we still discussing the trailer option, or is that something that's gonna be? No.
I can give you an update. I mean, I can do it now, or I can do it as part of the, after the public, we have two public comments that were written in addressing the trailer, I can just give it to you then, or.
Why don't we do it before our vote?
So the public now.
Question is, will come up once again about the use of trailers. Okay, you may recall that we've been directed by the county to shut our recycling center down to all commercial vehicles. Okay, I'm gonna read now an email from Stephanie Gorman, the Assistant Health Officer of the County of Morris. Okay, state laws restrict commercial vehicles and trailers from accessing municipal centers. That's an NJAC 7:26 1.4 and 1.3. Okay, and this response came as a follow-up to the email received from Mr. Benjamin earlier in the month. His personal trailer may be allowed if it meets the capacity limit set by NJAC 726.33, okay, which limits which has a weight restriction to it, okay, of 9,000 pounds for a single vehicle, or 16,000 pounds combined maximum gross vehicle for a vehicle puller to the trailer. Our issue is we have no way of measuring the weight of a vehicle or a trailer that comes in. If somebody has a alternative or a way we can do that, I'm happy to entertain it. Jake, you had mentioned perhaps buying some scales. That's something that would have to be brought up as part of the capital plan. I went to the county administrators meeting last Monday. I asked the 15 to 20 or so administrators that were there if they had some sort of solution. None of them had anything to offer me. I see Mr. Benjamin's email tonight suggested that he knows of a couple of towns that allow it. I would ask Mr. Benjamin to give me a call and let me know who those towns are. I'd be happy to follow up to see if there's some sort of workaround other than measuring the weight of the vehicle coming in.
So, Mr. Henry, may I make a suggestion? If we're talking about this now, is that the combined weight of the vehicle that's pulling the trailer and the trailer?
Yes.
Okay, so it should be fairly simple to compile a list of vehicles that, given the constraints on a small utility trailer, which is what the legislation permits, that has, you know, a certain footprint and a certain sides and all the rest of it, and a certain weight capacity, that if you take that maximum possible weight that that trailer could carry and add it to the biggest pickup truck that could be towing it, that we might be able to compile a list of vehicles that would comply with the law.
Are we under time constraints to pass this? Is there like a,
So the regulation went into effect April 1st. This ordinance has been advertised, so I guess you can table it or.
Or we could amend it once we have that, if it's deemed that that any workaround proposed is feasible. You know, it's not necessarily mine, but you know, if we come up with a way to make it possible for people to comply with the law and still use their vehicles to dispose of their recyclables, I would think that, you know, if we pass this ordinance, that we could amend it to create that flexibility.
What I would, just if I could just jump in for a second, you know, under paragraph D, the current language that, again, as Mr. Henry already said, it's been published. It currently prohibits trailers of any kind. If there is some solution or workaround, we could just amend that one portion in the future with the solution. But I would just emphasize the fact that this is already in effect. The New Jersey Administrative Code directs, and that April 1st date is already passed. So we would want to make, we would want to make sure that the other prohibitions that are also on here, but that are not being questioned right now by residents, like the farm vehicles and the, you know, U-Home, Home Depot, all the other things that are just prohibited, that we get that into effect as soon as possible.
sorry. So we're already not in compliance because it went into effect April 1st. If I show up tomorrow morning with a trailer and this isn't in effect, what are the guys down in DPW are going to say?
Send the trailers away.
They do currently. Okay. Even though they're complying with the law, even though the ordinance is not. So we may as well pass it and then modify it and see if, you know, the comments that I've heard is perhaps, other than weight, that, you know, perhaps we can get a trailer, you know, no longer than, you know, 24 square feet or 6x4 or something, that perhaps that will be permissible.
I would say the best thing to do is to pass it, and then we can go back and take a look at our alternatives and come back and make any amendments that we feel necessary. And I'm open to hearing what, you know, what any idea anybody has.
I'm comfortable with that. I would just, one question to add is if we were to strike D in its entirety, it's a
Material change.
material change.
That's of substance, and that would violate the 49.2 provision.
Did you have something, Ben?
No, just, we'll open up the public comment before we take that vote.
All right, so let's close the council discussion and open to the public comment that was on the page before this that I skipped over. So any members of public wishing to come forward?
I'll make a motion to open to the public comment.
All right, thanks.
You're good. It's a long.
Private 217 Crown Road, just
I want to answer, you guys were talking about weight. I was looking up an average, the Dodge Ram van, the Dodge Ram truck, it weighs 4,000 to 6,000 pounds. An average 5x8 trailer weighs 500 to 1,000 pounds, which is only a maximum of 7,000 pounds total.
And then you've got to
And then
think
you
about
guys
the
are-
contents of the trailer.
So to help you guys out there. Regarding the ordinance, if my understanding is correctly, we doubled all the sticker prices, correct? If I look at everything correctly.
Pretty close.
Because why did we even double it? Why didn't we just put like $5 on or like a 50%? This is like 100% increase. Is there a reason why we kind of doubled everything? That's my question. That's all.
I can, yeah, I mean,
Speak to
it was brought to by the DPW superintendent. They hadn't, I apologize. It was addressed by the DPW superintendent that they hadn't been increased in quite some time and they're well below the market rate.
And we're still well below market rate. with
I
this.
think $20 to get rid of your refrigerator is pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Home Depot charges $50 to take it away.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, letter.
No, Mike Wade's coming up.
the ordinance list.
Good evening, Mike Wade, 250 Rockaway Street. Smile a little. This is not going to the dentist for no Novocaine. On
Done
section
that.
D of this trailer thing, I've been reading it. And most of the people who are going to come there with these little 4x8 utility trailers that weigh 150 pounds, they're hooked up to a CRV, a Toyota Camry, or some other small SUV. And they hold maybe 500-600 pounds. You're not talking about a 40-foot trailer that has tandem wheels that you could put a truck on that and tow it. The whole thing, if you're looking at weight, might be 3,000 pounds, because the new cars today, they don't weigh anything. They're not like the 64 Chevy that, 8,000 pounds. So I think that the problem is that they lumped it into, let me get this right, in section D, they lumped it under commercial vehicles, trailers of any kind. They don't give you any avenue to say the little homeowner trailer, that's a 4x8 thing that, there's nowhere to dump the grass on their property or the bushes or anything. The other option, you'll love this one, is that the town come and pick it up from all the housing. How about that one? But anyway, I think the trailer thing is just something that you have to use common sense on. It's like the spirit of the law and how the legal of the law. The spirit of the law, they don't want contractors coming there with these big dumpster trailers and filling up the yard. But the average homeowner who comes with their little car on a 4x8 trailer, he's got 2 or 3 barrels full of sticks and branches and leaves. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Two of these letters refer to the.
Public comment?
They're specific to this ordinance.
Sure, go ahead and read them, Liz. 3 minutes.
Okay. The first is from Matt Benjamin. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. My comment again is in reference to the updated version of ordinance 130-22, more specifically D, which limits the ability for homeowners to move yard waste to the recycling facility with a small utility trailer. In researching the topic further after the last public meeting, small utility trailers under a certain weight are not restricted in these facilities by the state of New Jersey or the DEP. This restriction did not come from the state. Additionally, the Morris County MUA does not allow residents to take yard waste to their 2 facilities, eliminating this as an option. These restrictions will require residents of Boonton to own a pickup truck to move a barrel of grass clippings and all other bulk yard waste to the recycling center. It's simply not feasible. I am aware of a few other facilities that have similar restrictions, including municipalities that allow exceptions for small 4x8 utility trailers. I encourage the town to consider this as a possibility prior to voting on this new regulation. I agree with the restriction on commercial vehicles, rental vehicles, etc. However, homeowners that choose to take care of their own property should not be restricted by means of conveyance they use to move items to the facility. Traffic at the facility is not affected by a vehicle pulling a small trailer. Taxes are up and fees for using the facility are being voted on to be raised. I can't imagine this being the consensus of the majority of Boonton residents. Also, if this has yet to be discussed publicly, why has it been put into effect on April 1st, according to the mailers and posting on electronic boards throughout the town? My intention is to encourage residents to keep our town looking nice by maintaining their property and not to create regulations that make it more difficult for homeowners to do their part. Thank you for entertaining my concern. Very respectfully, Matt Benjamin. And the second is from William Graff. I'm writing to express my disappointment regarding the new policy banning small trailers from being used to transport recyclables to the Boonton Recycling Center. As a resident who takes pride in responsibly managing waste and doing my part to support sustainable practices in our town, this new rule feels both discouraging and unnecessary. For many of us, especially those who accumulate larger amount of recyclables, landscape waste, or help neighbors with their loads, using a small trailer has been an efficient and practical solution. The recent change not only creates an inconvenience, but also unintentionally dissuades people from recycling landscaping altogether if transporting items becomes too difficult. I understand that rules are often put in place for safety or logistical reasons, but I would appreciate more clarity on why this decision was made and whether any public input was considered. I hope the town will reconsider or at least offer alternative solutions that allow residents to continue recycling efficiently without owning a pickup. Thank you for your time and consideration. William Graff.
Thank you.
Mayor. Historically, we have had,
Back to council
we've
discussion.
built committees, for very specific things, when we've had issues in the town and we've wanted to find solutions. Is this something that we could address by committee?
I prefer, my personal feeling is that we have to do this while it's distasteful to comply with the law. But I would like to punt this back to DPW and see if they can come up with an alternative, and perhaps, you know, if we can go by square footage of trailers or something. But I think, you know, some of the public comments were, well, you're put this into effect before you change the ordinance. We're putting this into effect to comply with a law that's been passed. So we're while it's distasteful, and I think most of us feel that it's wrong, I really don't think we have a choice. But I would like to have the DPW committee see if they can come up with an alternative so that we don't dissuade sustainability. We don't dissuade recycling and keeping people's yards nice.
I agree completely, Mayor. I guess I would just ask for the DPW committee that, I don't know when your next meeting is, but if we can try and set a, you know, we'll come back to this council, you know, within 30 days, we'll try, whatever the right number is, that we just set that tonight. So we all know this is when this is coming back and it doesn't.
We have a date for the next meeting.
It's
About 2 weeks.
the fourth Monday in April. I think that's the 28th or something.
So is it reasonable to say that we'll, you know, aim to come back with an update, if not
Be the first meeting in
amendment by
May.
May 5th?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think I can get Mr. Rezzi working on it sooner, prior to the DPW meeting, so we have some sort of proposal to pitch to the committee.
I'll just add, we did discuss this at the previous DPW committee. The issue is that the state has written the law in such a way, we don't have the power to interpret it, and they've written the law in such a way that we don't have the power to comply with it without purchasing a scale.
Well,
So,
But there are ways, which we're working on.
DPW committee will
thank you.
explore options. It'll be on the agenda for your next meeting, correct?
Correct.
But I think it's a really important point that the state passed this without a mechanism for enforcement and put the ball in our court. And so this is a Democrat, as often happens coming from the state. And I think that it's really important. So I appreciate that we'll take a look at how can we do this. But I think I agree with the mayor's comment. This is not something that we want to do. This is something we're being forced into doing. And I appreciate the DPW can be looking into how we can do it.
Thank you.
I recommend perhaps that you reach out to some of the individuals who have contacted us and ask them for the specifications on the vehicles that they're using to see if they would be compliant or to see if we can establish some kind of workable parameters.
I'll just also add, Mr. Henry has already directed Mr. Ezzy to give us an understanding of how many actual residents does this affect? How many individuals are coming in with residential, non-commercial trailers?
I'm thinking that as spring ramps up, that number might increase.
So get a motion to move this ordinance forward.
So moved, Vincent?
Second, Megan.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Baylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Julia?
Yes.
Mr. Hetrick?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Vincent?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Weissman?
Yes.
Mary Lynch?
Yes. New business, ordinance 05-25, introduction title only. An ordinance authorizing an emergency appropriation. NJSA 40A:4-53, engagement of special consultants for a town-wide reassessment. Can I get a motion to introduce this?
So moved, Weissman.
Second, Megan.
Mayor, just before we vote, just a point of, I don't know which one it is. One of them.
As far as this is.
Yeah. I should know which point of whatever it is. To amend, I'd like to request to amend one part of this ordinance, which is at the end of the first paragraph. It currently reads, commonly referred to as a reassessment of real properties within the town of Boonton as approved by the County Board of Taxation and so on. I'd like to make a motion to amend that to read, commonly referred to as a reassessment of real properties within the town of Boonton as ordered by the Morris County Board of Taxation. And then so on for the rest.
And Mr. Weissman, just because, and for the clerk's benefit, because we're reading this in title only, if you could just give what your changes are to the clerk, she could make that update and then we would publish it like we normally do.
No problem. Do we need to get an approval from the group on
You
that?
can make the motion now and then have a second, but then
I'll
make sure
second
you
it.
give the clerk the language.
No problem.
Spoke. Thanks.
Right here.
Sir, seconds, a voice vote adequate on this?
Sorry, Mayor.
Is a voice vote adequate on this
Fine.
amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, now can we get a roll call, please, Liz?
Yes.
Stephen Egan?
Yes.
Mr. Hetrick?
Yes.
Mr. Meehan?
Yes.
Vincent?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Weissman?
Yes.
Mayor Lynch?
Yes. Thank you. Ordinance 06-25, introduction title only, an ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriation limits and establish a cap bank. NJSA 40A:4-45.14. Getting a motion to introduce this.
So moved, Ebenesia?
Second, Megan.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
Stephen Egan?
Yes.
Mr. Hetrick?
Yes.
Mr. Meehan?
Yes.
Vincent?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Weissman?
Yes.
Mayor Lynch?
Yes. Moving on, town council members, administrator, or town attorney comments. Any members of the council have any comments or issues they'd like to raise? Oh,
I got one. So there were reports that immigration and customs enforcement may have been present in Boonton yesterday and that someone may have been detained. While we don't yet know the full story or circumstances, I believe it's important to say this clearly, that every person, regardless of their immigration status, deserves to be treated with dignity and humanity. No person is illegal, and that phrase matters because it reminds us that laws and policies should never strip people of their basic human rights. Sorry, give me a second. The Trump administration's policy of deport first, ask questions later. Lost my place. Has been sloppy and caused immense harm to communities, families, and even our economy. And now this has come to Boonton. Our community, our home, our neighbors, our families. We can have honest conversations about immigration, but we can't let those conversations erase our shared humanity. Boonton's a town that values family, hard work, and community. We don't need to know someone's full history to recognize that they're a human being. Let's lead with empathy, even and especially when it's hard. That's how we build a stronger, kinder town for everyone. I hope we as a community can come together to support each other, love thy neighbor, and create a small town where our big heart can extend to all those who contribute to making Boonton the vibrant and diverse town that we all love. That's it.
any other comments or questions? Comments?
Well, I was gonna throw a plug out for the car show on April 27th.
Okay. Thank you.
And the townwide cleanup.
On the 19th, right?
Thank you.
All right, I believe there's some written in comments. No, not that's public. Bear with me, tough day.
A long day.
Close the council comments and open the meeting up to the public. Any members of the public wishing to come forward, please do so. Introduce yourself. You got 3 minutes. Mr. Wade.
Yes. 250 Rockaway Street, then moved out to New Jersey. Two things, I wasn't gonna say anything, but, since you brought up Mr. Trump, we lived under 4 years of a guy who didn't know where he was. It's coming all out now. That's all I'll say about that. As far as immigration, I've known numerous people who have come here, worked hard, went through the proper channels. I even know somebody who went to India. He was born here, went to India, married a beautiful girl. It's a 7-day wedding there. Makes me nuts. And he went to the embassy to bring her back as his wife. He had to wait 90 days. 90 days. He's a citizen. She becomes his wife. But anyway, as far as the trailers go, what was the mailer went out, 30 days ago? I'm sure you guys knew it for 60, and it's like a big surprise now. Come on, guys. This is something that, and did the state actually pass a law saying no trailers? Did they really pass that? Or is it just something the county? Because on the flyer, it just says created by the county. Thank you.
Anyone else?
One more letter, sir.
Letter, please.
Okay. This is from Ashley Carrion. I am deeply concerned about the state of our town's building department, which has become a free-for-all for development of rule enforcement regulations for implementation standards. Builders operate without proper oversight, and projects move forward with minimal adherence to codes, putting residents at risk. Poor permit application quality, lack of thorough reviews, inadequate follow-up have become the norm. Neighbor notifications are often ignored, leaving communities unaware of projects that directly impact them. Yet when I raise concerns about these issues, I am met with defensive and condescending responses rather than clear factual answers. At no point have I questioned the qualifications or integrity of the team. I have simply sought clarification on matters that affect my neighborhood. If asking reasonable questions is seen as offensive, the problem lies not with the inquiry, but with the response. I urge the town council to take immediate action to restore accountability within the building department. Strengthening enforcement, improving permit reviews, and ensuring rigorous inspections are critical to maintaining safety and quality in our town's development. Addressing community concerns should be a straightforward process, not an opportunity for deflection and posturing. If the department is truly operating at its best and properly following existing protocols, then we must evaluate those protocols themselves. Too many concerns are being raised by residents, only to be dismissed with assurances that everything is fine. If our current regulations allow this level of unchecked development, then they need to be amended to ensure we have real control over growth and protect the integrity of our neighborhoods. From Ashley Carey. That's it.
Any others? Liz, any others?
No.
Okay, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved, Balin.
Second, Evenesia.
All in favor?
Aye.